Hello, everyone. This is episode 10 of Live Q&A. My name is Mallory Miette. I'm a speech pathologist, infant feeding specialist, craniosacral therapist, specialize in infant reflux and oral development. Feel free to ask your questions as you join. And I'm going to start the conversation with questions that were submitted via Instagram. My Instagram is at infant.feeding.specialist. So be sure to subscribe and follow. All right, I'm eating a mint. The first question is, can you get enough functional gains with body work for optimal breathing airway with tongue ties? This is such an interesting question because I think that you can. However, it depends on the severity of your tie. So you have anterior ties, your posterior ties. We talk about tongue ties a lot. You can go look at what a tongue tie is. I have a post specifically on ties. Why I say, can you get functional gains is because I've seen it before. It really depends on like, let's say you're an adult and you go for myofunctional therapy and you do myofunctional therapy and you start to feel better. Then you're at optimal timing for release, right? A lot of times people talk about what is the optimal timing for release. And that's you do your pre-work, you get those new motor plans moving, the increased awareness, the muscles are awake, we decrease body tension, and now it's time to release. And then you have after where you can really see and feel those changes. So functional gains, yes, you can get functional gains. Will it be as optimal as if you released it, that post-release gain? No, because it's still tethered down, right? But sometimes what can look like a tongue tie is actually tension in the mouth, tension in the body, vagus nerve disruption, leading to symptoms and appearance that mimic a posterior tongue tie more specifically. If you have an anterior tie, there's no really like hiding that. There's the posterior tie is harder because it's deeper. And because it's deeper, it holds a lot more muscle for that tension. Anterior tie, if it's getting stuck in between your teeth, it's the tie is there. And so anterior ties, it's less likely you're not going to reach optimal function with an anterior tie when it's visible and it's there. Your posterior components, you can make much better change when you do the oral play and body work. So can you get enough functional gains for breathing airway? Yeah, you can get the tongue up. You can get the tongue up. You can get good mouth closure. But is there going to be some sort of compensation with the cheek? Is there going to be some sort of compensation with the sternocleidoid mastoid muscle, right? Maybe, because we're not reaching optimal, right? So here's your tongue tie. Before the tongue tie is functional gains, and then you get optimal gains post tie. So functional gains, yes, I think so. And it also depends on, was it a true tongue tie or was it a faux tie? Because then you can get optimal. I hope that helps. Okay. Intuitive eating. Can this be disrupted with an overactive letdown, overproduction, or nursing to sleep? So this is interesting. I just realized that my music is still playing, and so I'm going to close that because I hope that you guys can hear me. And now I don't know. If anyone is on, can y'all tell me if you just heard all that? Okay. Intuitive eating. Can this be disrupted with overactive letdown, overproduction, or nursing to sleep? The thing with breastfeeding is that we, as a breastfeeding parent, you tend to listen to baby's cues more because you are unaware of ounces. When with bottle feeding parents, I find that they are so hyper focused on specific ounces, whereas a breastfeeding parent judges like time and really learns baby's cues and learns how to respond to those cues. Bottle feeding parents are in a different category because from day one, they are taught and pushed to give a certain amount of ounces every single time they feed, and then increase at this specific time frame. Breastfeeding babies is different. So if you have an overactive letdown and overproduction, I find that it's more about baby learning how to handle those things. So where you might have more reflux in the beginning, or you might deal with reflux the whole time, or oral motor dysfunction gets overlooked because of the overproduction. Like usually I find it's reflux and oral motor deficits that get pushed aside or overlooked because of those things versus intuitive eating being disrupted. Because I find those babies, um, they still have to get the letdown going, right? But then they judge that fullness and they stop. Um, so no, I don't think so. But you do have other feeding difficulties, like a lot of times babies will end up snacking because maybe they're struggling with the letdown because of oral dysfunction, but people are like, oh, you just have a fast letdown, let it go. But it's really their oral dysfunction, because even with a heavy letdown and overproduction, babies should learn to manage that. And so you have other issues like snacking behavior start, um, reflux, like I said. Nursing to sleep. No, I don't think so, because unless you feel like, unless they're wanting to nurse to sleep, and so they're forcing more milk on in them, if that makes sense. If you have a letdown and they're usually content, but when you nurse them to sleep, they drink 2 or 3 letdowns, then we could be interrupting their satiation cues, um, in order to support them going to sleep, if that makes sense. So if they're intaking more letdown, because even if a baby's on a breast for, let's say they normally feed for 5 minutes, 6 minutes, whatever the minutes is, but when they're nursing to sleep at night, or if you co-sleep and they're nursing and they're on it for 15 or 20 and you feel more let down, then I would be concerned that we're overriding their system. But that is totally person dependent. So at surface level, I would say no, you're safe. Breastfeeding itself is sort of intuitive eating. Um, but also looking into like other things. I would look into other things and make sure you don't fit in any of those outline categories. This is live Q&A, so if you have any questions, please feel free to jot them down. And just so I don't have to keep repeating myself when people join and leave. Please feel free to ask your questions. Okay, the next one is, what kind of pacifiers do you recommend to promote good arch development? You're bringing out the controversy in this one. So, good arch development? None. There's no pacifier that's good arch development because it keeps the tongue away from the palate space. And the tongue is the body's natural palate expander. So none. I don't care what anyone tells you. Now, let's get into pacifiers in general. You hear so many people talking about pacifiers and having the round Soothie ones. And I know I have one somewhere, but the traditional round Soothies, they look like a bottle nipple, right? They're long, and then they come out at the end. Avent Soothie, Dr. Brown, your traditional cylindrical pacifiers is what people are like, you have to keep these, you have to do these no matter what. These are the good ones because they teach the tongue to cup around. Okay, sure, they can teach the lateral pieces of the tongue to lift up, right, and cup around the nipple. I'm trying to figure out how to say this. The other part of their debate is that, yeah, you need this one because it doesn't anchor the tongue down, which is the silliest thing I've ever heard, because anything you're putting in the mouth is anchoring the tongue down. The tongue is anchored down. Laterally, can it curve around it? Yeah. If your baby has oral dysfunction, the tongue won't be able to do that. And the other part is that it needs to be gone by 4 to 6 months. So you have to use these, and it has to be gone by 4 to 6 months. And that's where I call BS, because for most parents, the pacifier just isn't gone after 4 to 6 months. And we have to be talking about why that's happening, more than don't use any other pacifiers because this one is going to be good for optimal oral development. No, that's not the case. And so the Avent Soothies, yes, while you're trying to establish a feeding plan, love the Avent Soothie. If your baby is using a pacifier to calm down to go to sleep, I always recommend popping it out when they fall asleep, pushing their tongue up into the palate space so that we can get that interaction going. And my hope is that, yeah, they are off the pacifier by 4 to 6 months. If they're not, if you're at 4 months and you don't have any plans on getting rid of the pacifier, that is when I would switch to the orthodontic. The Nook specifically, because it is so super flat, and I'm trying to decrease the amount of input that baby is seeking from the pacifier. The cylindrical ones, they're bouncy, right? So when baby's sucking, they get input from that. The MAM orthodontic ones that have a big bulb on the end, those are squishy and you're getting input from that. The Nook ones that are flat all the way up and down, they're not getting lots of input from that. And then I always want you to go to the highest age range because I do want it to be bigger so that we're not having this little pacifier keep pushing and pushing and pushing up into the palate space. That's also why I don't go with the Avent Soothies for any baby that's older than really 3 months. Once you have your feeding plan established, I want you to switch pacifiers. One, because I want you to decrease the amount of input they get, in the hopes that when we pull it out, we can get the tongue elevated to the palate and stop the pacifier altogether. But if your baby is used to getting input from the mechanism of a pacifier, it's bouncy, right? Then that's the input they're going to be seeking. So once feeding is established, I say get rid of the Avent Soothie. Move to your Nook orthodontic because it decreases input, and go with the highest age range so it's not so narrow sitting in that space. There's no pacifier that's good for oral development. Now, the Ninny, Ninni, is a new pacifier. It's big. It's expensive, but it is really good. It's super soft. It still keeps the tongue away from the palate space. So it still anchors the tongue down. You can literally see it because you can see through the pacifier and the tongue is down in the mouth, but the tongue learns good rhythm. It's good for teaching the motor function of what we want it to do when it's sucking on the breast or the bottle. It is wide, not skinny and cylindrical. So yes, the ninny I like, but even still, we need to be pulling it out and the tongue needs to learn to go up to the palate space. But it is nice and wide. You're getting good pressure that's nice and wide. But there's nothing that compares to the tongue actually sitting up there. Okay, I hope that helped. Talk about cheek sucking pads. Do they improve and how? Your sucking pads are big, are these pads right here. And they're big in infants and newborns to help close off the cheek space for intraoral pressure to suck and swallow. Cheek pads, in my studies, I learned that they are usually not, they usually don't fully develop until 37 to 38 weeks in utero. In between 37 and 38 weeks in utero. So your babies who are born 37, 36, even 37 and 5 may not have their cheek pads fully developed. I hear lots of people say just feed them, give them more to eat. The more they gain weight, the fatter their cheek pads will get. And I have yet to read anything that says that. I'm also hugely against that in general, because why are we overfeeding just to increase fat in the cheeks? When there's other things that go on. So the cheek pads are good for feeding when we're trying to close off that space. There's strategies you can use to close off that space. I talk about cheek support. And eventually feeding efficiency comes into play. So the cheek pads aren't always necessary when feeding. They're helpful and they're beneficial in the newborn phase when they're learning. But once the lips learn what to do, once the tongue gets good coordination, I'm going to sneeze. Oh, excuse me. Then the cheek pads serve less of a purpose. So I'm never for overfeeding just to get the cheek pads bigger. I don't understand that thought process. And if you have research that says otherwise, please share. Do they improve? They don't need to improve. The other feeding components need to improve. And the cheeks can learn, right? How to help babies, specifically prematures with low muscle tone, feeding and body moves. Babies who are premature need that time. With feeding, I'm hoping that you had therapy. A baby who has low muscle tone, I talk about low muscle tone a lot. You cannot change tone. The muscle tone is what the body is built as. It's the muscle's response to input, and that does not change. That is how you were born. Now, the only way to sort of support low muscle tone is to increase strength. Okay. The problem is a lot of babies who have low muscle tone carry lots of tension because they are trying to recruit other muscles. So we have to relax the body and then strengthen. A tight muscle is a weak muscle. So whereas like a low tone baby may be throwing their head back, it's because of tension here that they're holding their head back. If you relax those muscles, they are weak. So feeding and body moves, I'm not sure what you mean by body moves, but with feeding, you're going to do everything that I teach. You're still going to do the same thing you would do with a full term um um I don't like to use the word normal, but normal tone baby. Um we're sideline. We're giving support where they need it. We're following their pace. We are doing cued feeding, right? We're not overfeeding. Um with body moves, this is the that question is why I have the guides. So if you don't already have the Get Unstuck and Baby Unwind guide, that is what you need to answer this question. How do you help babies with feeding who are premature with low muscle tone? Everything that's in the Get Unstuck guide. How do you work with them with body movements? Everything that's in the Baby Unwind guide. So I'm going to link them below because that is what you need. Okay. No questions. So that is it. I'm going to go into my post and make sure I don't want to add anything from what we talked about. I did a post on colic, but I also posted that. So that is a video available to go listen to. And the last one is a video on talking about how to present the bottle. There was a doctor on Instagram who suggested that bottle feeding parents, to get them to eat, wait until baby is really hungry, which you all know what I feel about that, and then tap their bottom lip. Tapping the bottom lip makes them go down into it. Tapping the top makes them open up into it. Okay. So I talk about it in the post. If you want to go check that out, you can. But it's just like breastfeeding. This is why bottle feeding education is so wrong. So if you want more information on that, that is in the Instagram post. All right, you guys, thanks for being here. I do it every week. Every Tuesday and Thursday at 3 p.m. is a live Q&A. So come join me, ask your questions, and I will talk to you guys later. I don't know. Oh, I do have, no, that's for Instagram. But disclaimer, I'm a speech language pathologist, but I'm not your speech language pathologist. This is all generalized information and ideas to get you thinking and looking at your baby differently. Good luck with everything, you guys. Bye.